Hey, FlimsyLunchTray here, and welcome to World of Warships for our Saturday edition video, being upgrade and commander build video on the Tier 6 Japanese torpedo destroyer, the Fubuki, which I quite enjoy playing at Tier 6, and you can catch me with this ship in action in the Friday highlight that I upload yesterday, which I'll have at the end of this video as well. So, we're going to go over the armor, the commander, upgrades, modules, combat signals, armaments, all those type of things in this video. Feel free to check out the timeline stamps below. If you do want to hop around, you're more than welcome to. But in just starting off, as traditional, what type of destroyer is the Fubuki? Well, I kind of gave it away when we first began our conversation here, and that is that she's a torpedo destroyer. You have gunboat destroyers, you have torpedo destroyers, and you have hybrid destroyers, a mix of both. But Fubuki is definitely a torpedo destroyer, as she has a very deadly armament here of 3 triple tube torpedoes, so she gets 9 torpedoes in total. But she does have some guns that are definitely no slouch and can dish out a little bit of damage that have high explosive alpha damage from what I remember. But that being said, her armor layout, well, I mean, it's a tier 6. It's going to be pretty standard of a combination of 16mm and 10mm across the way. So nothing shocking there in that regard. But we will talk about how to try to have some more additional protection in the form of an upgrade to keep our guns as well as our torpedoes in action here as well. So let's go ahead and go into looking at the modules first here on the Fubuki. So there's no upgrade on her main battery, with nothing, nothing being built into commander or upgrades. Her reload time is 7.5 seconds for these 127mm guns. They have a 180-degree turn time of 26.1 seconds, which tells you right there she's not a hybrid, or, I mean, not a gunboat destroyer, or really, per se, a hybrid, because ideally you have a lot better 180-degree turn traverse time with the main battery. Her high explosive shell damage is 2,150. Her maximum AP shell damage is 2,200. Hull A, which if you are going up this line now, I definitely recommend picking up the hull upgrade first. You'll get a slight buff in terms of her survivability, defense, and maneuverability. Here you can see 11,500, or the upgraded has 12,900. And then you also see a buff there to the defense, but again, you will be walked over no matter if you see a tier 6 or a tier 8 CV. And a slight buff there on her maneuverability there as well. Her torpedoes, this would be what I'd go for next in terms of the upgrades, or the modules, excuse me, upgrading the module. Stock, she has the Type 8 torpedoes that have 180 return time of 7.2 seconds and a 73-second reload time. But then you see the 6-kilometer torpedo range, 14,600 maximum damage. They do go faster than the upgraded torpedoes at 63 knots. And they have a slightly worse detectability range. So definitely an upgrade when you go from 6-kilometer to 10-kilometer range torpedoes. And you see we lose 3 seconds there on that 100 or the reload time. But more range, more maximum damage. We lose a little speed and better detectability range versus the 1.6 you have on the stock torpedoes. Next, you have the gunfire control system. Stock range is 10.5. And then upgraded gunfire control system is 11.5. I would recommend building into the guns or the range of these on the commander, which we'll talk about here shortly. Again, this is a torpedo destroyer. Go ahead and demount these. Your propulsion is 50,000 horsepower. You go 35 knots. So not too shabby, so to speak. Your American destroyers and Russian destroyers are going to outrun the Fubuki, so ideally, you never want to be pushing into and being caught off guard by like a Farragut, Mahan, or a tier 6, tier 7 equivalent in terms of the German or Russian destroyers. With Sarah Mike flag, we can get up to 36.8 knots, and our engine boost is a plus 8%, which means we get up closer to, what, 39 knots, maybe closer to 40. So we can get some needed speed when we find ourselves in tricky situations, and that's normally if I'm not using an engine boost to get out of a tricky situation and just trying to get over across the map first more quickly, that's usually how I use the engine boost. But I really do try to have it on hand if I get caught up by a gunboat destroyer or get caught in some radar, as an example. Let's go ahead and get some upgrades mounted on here. So what I'm going to recommend is the main armaments mod 1. This reduces the risk of your main battery and torpedo tubes becoming incapacitated by -20%, improves their survivability by plus 50%, and reduces their repair time if they should be incapacitated by -20%. That doesn't cover permanent incapacitations, just a temporary incapacitation. So that's 125,000 credits, so we'll throw that on. Really good to have. I don't recommend the other options here. I mean, you wouldn't take magazine mod 1. If you're playing ranked randoms, clan battles, you just take the Juliet Charlie combat signal. The second slot, 2 options to go for here. The stock or a standard upgrade would be the engine room protection, which is what I run in general on the Fubuki. So we're just reducing the risk of our engine and steering gears becoming incapacitated by -20%, and also reducing the repair time of the engine and steering gears if they should be knocked out. So in standard practice, this is the one I like to run. Otherwise, if you really like playing Fubuki and you plan to stick with her for a while, or maybe you're going up the line for Shimakaze, and you're like, hey, I have the coal, I would like to go and pick up this special upgrade, being the engine boost modification 1, which would extend your action time by plus 30%. So you have a longer engine boost as you go around the map, or you're trying to disengage. So what you do is you click on that, it'll take you into the armory. Usually always takes a minute for it to load for me. If you don't have the 25% off coupon, it is 17,000 coal. If you do have the coupon, it is 12,750 coal. So you always recommend trying to pick up these special upgrades with the coupon. Save yourself some coal, especially if you're a newer player. So I'd only recommend this. A, you plan playing Fubuki a lot, you really like it, or B, you're going up the line and like, hey, I can make that coal investment now and just demount and remount it as you go up the line of the Imperial Japanese Navy torpedo destroyer line. But for our purposes, I'm just going to put the engine room protection on. The third slot has a couple options. Really the one you want is the torpedo tubes modification 1. Again, this is a torpedo destroyer. She's not a hybrid destroyer. She's not a gunboat destroyer. She is a torpedo destroyer. So let's make that even better. The big thing here is your speed, plus 5%, also better torpedo tube traverse speed, and reduces the risk of your torpedoes becoming incapacitated by -40%. And you have 3 racks located across the hull of the deck of the Fubuki, so we really do want to keep those going. So let me just show you where it's at now. So you see 7.2 seconds, 180 turn time, speed 59 knots. Put that on for 500,000 credits. Then you're going to see it drop down to 6 seconds for the 180 turn time, and then we go from 59 knots to 62 knots, which also means the faster torpedoes are going, the less of a reaction time that an enemy cruiser, destroyer, battleship player has to respond and try to avoid taking those torpedoes. Otherwise, again, I don't recommend these other things. Again, you're not guns, so there's really no point in building into these, in my opinion, but to each their own. The fourth slot, I'll recommend propulsion modification 1. This reduces your time taken to reach full engine power when accelerating. Nothing like getting caught out by a radar. Maybe you're kind of sitting somewhat still. You don't always constantly have to be on the move. If you're waiting for your torpedoes reload and you want to get some off before maybe you duck behind an island. But being caught out by radar, getting caught off guard by a gunboat destroyer or a hybrid destroyer, you want to take cover. I really do recommend the propulsion mod 1 in that regard, just to get yourself out of danger more quickly. In addition to the fact, when you pair that with the engine boost, it responds really well in terms of your propulsion. Armament-wise, where these are the notorious IJN high explosive shells that have a decent damage to them. So just as an example, because I don't know this off the top of my head, let's just kind of compare with some of the other tier 6 destroyers here. So if I went to Farragut, and I look at the high explosive damage here, you see 1800. If I went to Gnevany, you see 1900. So you do definitely see that Fubuki, just when I'm comparing just to those 2 destroyers as an example, that you do have a better high explosive shell damage. Now, of course, these guns do not reload as quickly as the Anemone or the Farragut, but what they do is hit hard when they do connect. So that's kind of the beauty of the high explosive shells on the IJN torpedo line, but also at the same time a little bit of a pain in terms of that reload time, because you're just not equipped to go toe-to-toe with full health destroyers unless they're really low and you have enough hit points to take it. But that being said, your chances of causing fire on target is 9%, armor penetration capacity 21mm, initial velocity 915 meters a second. So these also have a decent shell velocity as well, meaning that just takes less time for your shells to travel and reach their target. Now the armor piercing shells do maximum damage of 2,200, same initial velocity of 915 meters a second, and I do recommend using the AP on these guns when you have, you catch off at the broadside Dallas, a Leander, an Omaha, other destroyers. You're close enough, you can Citadel cruisers, especially the light armored cruisers. Torpedoes, again, 76-second reload time without anything with the commander yet. Torpedo range 10 kilometers, maximum damage 16,267. Torpedo speed 62 knots, detectability range by 1.5. And then we go to the depth charges. They do a maximum damage of 4,600 apiece. Number of charges, 2. You only get 6 bombs in a charge. So I don't think the ASW is good as compared to the Farragut as an example. But you are given ship-based ASW if you run across the sub, because it's at tier 6, you start seeing submarines here in World Warships. In terms of our consumables, pretty standard, 5-second action time, cooldown time 40 seconds here on Destroyer. Nothing mind-blowing there. Smoke generator stock without superintendent. You do get 3 of them, and they have an action radius of 0.45 kilometers. Consumable action time 20 seconds, so pay attention. Something like Farragut would get closer, I think it's like 30 seconds. So this, if you're trying to draw a smoke screen wall for like a cruiser or something, just note it's not going to be as long action time on the consumable, and not as long of a smoke screen dispersion time. And of course, the destroyer lines kind of vary in the representation of that. But a cooldown time of 160 seconds. So do be mindful when you drop this, that you're not just dropping it for the sake of dropping it and just completely fleeing the scene. You will want to try to be tactical when you use your smoke screens, and when you're not using them to just smoke up and start gunning down a target necessarily. Now sometimes you might have to, but typically you're trying to use these maybe for a teammate or strategic wise, if you're trying to consider yourself in a retreat, something to that effect. Engine boost, also get 3 of them, maximum speed plus 8%, consumable action time, 120 seconds. With the engine boost mod, I think you get closer to, it's like 150 seconds because it's plus 30%. Cooldown time, 120 seconds. Number of consumables, 3. Now we can run with the November Foxtrot, which I often, and I do like to run, and we can reduce the cooldown time, here 40 to 38. 160 to 152, and 120 to 114. Otherwise, with the other combat signals here, I do like to increase our chances of flooding. I'm trying to remember if I can actually see our chances of flooding here on the torpedoes. No, I'm not seeing it. It's kind of annoying. Sometimes I feel like they had it here, and other times they don't. But we can increase chances of flooding by plus 15%. You also take a risk of your ship's magazine detonating plus 5%, but if you're playing ranked random clan battles, ideally it doesn't matter because you're just taking Julie Charlie combat signal, right? So increasing the flooding chance of these IGN torpedoes is really great because they, in standard practice, already have a decently high flooding percentage. So we're going to make that even better. I am a cheeky little destroyer player. Sometimes I do find myself in a situation I have to ram, so I take the Hotel Yankee, damage caused from ramming an enemy plus 50%, so maybe you actually kill and take the battleship with you, and you take negative 20% less damage when ramming an enemy. Otherwise, if you want to extend your smokescreen action time, you can. So we go from 20 to 22. And you see I have plenty of them because I keep getting them from super containers all the time, and it's really annoying. I've actually even sold some. The other thing we can talk about is just increasing the fire chance on your shells if you feel like you have plenty of those. You can get up to 10%. I don't really, because I mean it's 9 to 10. It's not a massive difference, and if you want to conserve some combat signals, then I would recommend that, and maybe even recommend just dropping that and just kind of running with these 5. But if you want to use all 8, then I would do that. Now in terms of our commander, I'm trying to conserve some elite commander XP, so do I just put, this is already trained for Fubuki, yeah. So we'll just put him back on, so I don't have to put like a more higher skilled 0.1 on. And I'll show you some possible examples you can run with here. Now there are, you have special commanders like Yamamoto Isuroku, which has his own talents and plethora. I'd be kind of questioning why you're running him on Fubuki, but maybe you're going up the line. I'm not going to go, well, I have time. But as an example, he has the second wind when you activates upon earning the Kraken Unleashed, which in the video I showed you yesterday, I did get that Kraken. I got 2 Krakens actually in the day I was playing, grinding Fubuki, going up the Shimakaze line again for research reward point purposes. But you restore your hit points, your main battery reload time drops by -34%, your torpedo tube reload time drops by -16%. So this is a crazy cracked talent, so if you really like playing Fubuki a lot, then Yamamoto Isuroku is really like the commander to have here on your Fubuki. And then you also have Emergency Reserve. If you get the First Blood, you get additional consumable there as well. And for destroyers, basically he has an enhanced skill on the preventive maintenance, so it's -45% with your modules becoming incapacitated versus I think it's -30%. And then also he has a main battery traverse speed buff because destroyers on the IGN line tend to have a slower 180-degree turret traverse time. So he's really ideal to run here. Otherwise, I would recommend running either Takao Suzuki or Razo Suzuki. As I'm training up this guy now, the skill he has, enhanced skill, there's no talents on these guys, but he has an enhanced skill on the survivability expert. So rather than being plus 350 hit points HP increase for each ship tier, it's plus 400. So I'm training him up as a new commander to have on my Shimakaze line. So they're really good to pick up. And just to go over that, we can run into the armory. I'm pretty sure that's where both of them are at. One's going to be for 35,000 coal, one's going to be for 1,500 doubloons. Yeah, so 35,000 coal, 1,500 doubloons. So even if you're a new player in the game, I really recommend making the investment and just try to start working on these commanders in increasing their points versus getting to 21 per commander and then like, now I decide I want to go ahead and invest in the season commander after you just went up a whole line and invested a lot of elite commander XP, commander XP into your commander. That being said, in terms of the build here, I'm just going to show you, start off with the 10-point bread and butter build, like 95% of destroyers, you run this on them here in World of Warships. That starts with preventive maintenance. Risk of modules becoming incapacitated, -30%. Secondary battery and a mount survivability plus 15%. But really, you're just taking this, for reducing the risk of your main turrets, torpedo tubes, steering gears, and engine from becoming incapacitated. For a 3-point commander, you want to take Last Stand. The ship remains partially able to sustain speed and maneuverability with engines and steering gears incapacitated. If you don't have this and you lose your engine, you're sitting dead duck in the water. If you lose your steering gears, right, then you might be locked in a circle if you don't have your damage control party available. So really this is vital to run. No question in my mind to take that on Fubuki. The next is Survivability Expert. HP increase for each ship tier plus 350. Now I know there's going to probably begin to be some disagreement on the Shimakaze torpedo destroyer line, like, hey, why do you need Survivability Expert? You're a torpedo destroyer, you're supposed to stay dark all the time. But yeah, I mean, but it's impossible to do that. Generally speaking, like I've only ever had like I could probably with just 2 hands, or maybe just 1 hand, the amount of games I've had here in World of Warships where I played an entire torpedo destroyer game not being detected. Like it's really rare. I mean, of course you can go out of your way and never fire your guns and just, you know, sit down at J1, right? But then you're just not contributing a part of the battle. So then people will be like, hey, go for a full investment in the torpedoes. I disagree with that. I think survivability expert is definitely still needed. I've had games that have been all the difference just because of having those additional hit points. And those 2 seasoned commanders I showed you, they have an enhanced skill and a survivability expert plus 400 plus, rather than just the plus 350, is really good in general. So this would be a plus 350 times 6, so see 12,900 to 15,000. So 2,000 hit points is actually a big difference, especially down here at tier 6, and if you're running into tier 8s, right? Then for 10 point would be concealment. So if you see without, we're 6.7 by sea and 3 kilometers by air. Now you see we're 6 kilometers by sea and 2.7 by air. So this is just really good all in all to have on your Fubuki. Like, your concealment is quite competitive. You're like among the top 10, if I don't remember if it's top 5 of destroyers. I think I talked about in yesterday's video in terms of concealment, right? So you'd be kind of crazy not to build into that. So definitely do that. Then from here, this is where things may begin to differ, but in general practice, what I'm going to show you is probably the best to run. But again, you can make a few concessions here and there depending on your own personal preference. Myself, I like to take Adrenaline Rush after this as a 13-point commander so that I get my torpedoes reloading faster. So I go from 76 to 73, 70 as an example. As this skill works for each 1% of HP lost, your main battery guns reload faster, your torpedoes reload faster, your Katyria's A damage gets a slight buff, but it's mainly the torpedoes is why we take Adrenaline Rush as we lose hit points. And then a skill that ties in well with Adrenaline Rush is, of course, Fill the Tubes. This is a no-brainer to run here on Fubuki. So now you definitely see we shave off 7.6 seconds on our reload time, so 68.4. Now talk about Adrenaline Rush, 66, 65, 64, 63 seconds. All right, so getting closer to that 1 minute reload time with Adrenaline Rush. You know, then maybe you got a Kraken Unleashed with Yamamoto Isoroku as your commander, right? And you shave off, what is that, negative 16% off your torpedo reload time, so then you're running under 60 seconds, but, you know, maybe by then the battle's almost over. But just kind of give you an idea of why these skills run together really well. And then after that, I would take Swift Fish. This would increase your speed by plus 5%. So you see we go from that 60, was it 62, right? 62 knots to 65 knots. So that's all in all really great to be able to run here. And then after this point, there can be some variations in what you do. You know, I could even take some things away here and we can mix it up. It all depends, because you see the torpedo Shimakaze line has been a game for a long time, so a lot of players have different preferences here. But at this point, I say, like, this is really good, and then you have 3 points that you can go in several different directions with, right? You could go for Superintendent, give yourself a 4th smoke, 4th engine boost. I usually only recommend Superintendent if you're a torpedo destroyer player who's generally alive the last half of the battle. If you regularly die before halfway through the battle, then Superintendent is meaningless for you if you're like rather aggressive as a torpedo destroyer player. But if you are like myself, you tend to live in the last half of the battle, then I can see Superintendent being quite helpful, right? That 4th engine boost, that 4th smoke screen might make the difference, being able to go dark and maybe kill a battleship with guns, or let him come up on me, dump torpedoes into him, whatever. There's a lot of different scenarios you can run there. Other thing you could do is talk about Liquidator, so we can increase the chance of our torpedoes causing flooding even more. So that's always satisfying when you flood out battleships, and that as an example. This would leave you with only 2 skill points, so then it's like, well then Flimsy, what would you do with the other 2 points if I wanted to invest something full on like this? Well, that is a really good question, because, you know, normally as a torpedo destroyer, you're not often detected. Like, priority target on, like I say, is more meaningful on a hybrid destroyer or a gunboat destroyer, right? But maybe you want it just for your own personal preference. But something on the Fubuki, I would say, you know, let's just go ahead and take that, grease the gears, and get our turret traverse down from being 26.1 to 22.7. And then I would probably just take incoming fire alert. So when a salvo is fired at me from a distance greater than 4.5, then I know I need to start using my WSD skills and being mindful. So that's, if you want to do the full torpedo, the liquidator, then I would just take the other 2 points and drop them into something like that. Now, there's going to be some people who say, well, you could still do this, Flimsy, but then drop survivability expert. And then you could take something like radio location skill, as this indicates an enemy ship closest to you. Is kind of this arc, as you see to the left here. So then you know what destroyers might be pushing into you before you actually end up getting spotted, so you can be aware of that. So radio location, which I do run on Shimakaze, has been quite helpful there. I don't remember exactly how the skill points distributed there, but I think it was probably something like this I may have done on Shima. If you want to still have survivability expert and you really want to have radio location, then you could do something like this as an example. That's another way to go. I mean, you can drop things, you can spin it around depending on how you want to do it. There's a couple different examples. So let me just kind of go start from scratch again and just kind of give you the general builds. I think with Fubuki, myself, I probably quite like running this because I did have multiple games when I'm playing Fubuki. This is my personal preference where I ran out of smoke, I ran out of engine boost, and it would have been helpful if I'm trying to help I try to really be a team player, drop smoke from my cruiser friends or destroyer friends, right? It's more forgiving, you don't have as much radar at tier 6, or the long hydros. So I might lean towards this as an option. Yeah. Otherwise, you know, if you want to do the full torpedo build, then I would say just do something like this. If you really want to have RPF, then I'd probably do something about like this. In my mind, I really can't give up survivability expert, and I really can't give up adrenaline rush just because adrenaline rush works so well with fill the tubes and your guns as a whole. So it's just kind of a no-brainer to not take these two because they blend together so well, and having that additional hit points is really helpful when you have to finish off some, you know, maybe last destroyers at the end of the game who are low. So this could be another option that would be very top in my mind. The reason why I probably don't lean towards relocation as much at tier 6 is the skill floor that you have to have at tier 6 is different than tier 10 with like Shimakaze example, because there's just some very nasty gunboat destroyers and radar destroyers and hydro destroyers up at tier 6 or tier 10, excuse me, where generally at the mid tier you kind of have a rough idea where players will be. So then I feel more comfortable, you know, going for some type of full-on torpedo build, or a mix, and also building into having additional superintendent. But to each their own. You know, if you're taking a commander up to Shimakaze, then probably what I would recommend is doing something like this or like that, but it'll be for your own personal preference. The other thing that I haven't talked about yet, of course, is also Briss, Swift and Silence. This is also really good for Shimakaze and Fubuki, but again, let's focus on Fubuki here, where you do take a permanent effect. You lose plus 5% on your main battery reload time, but increase your ship speed while she remains undetected plus 8%. So you're getting around the map that much more quickly. And generally speaking, you are dark most of the time as Shimakaze, as Fubuki. So I keep referencing Shimakaze too much. I'm just thinking if you're future planning, right? So honestly, I could see a lot of benefit here. Now on Fubuki at mid tiers, if you're getting tier 6, tier 5 matchmaking, your maps aren't as big. So not compared to the tier 8, 9, 10 super ship maps, where the maps are so much bigger. So I don't see as much of a need for Swift and Silence at the tier 6. Now, if you get bottom tiered versus tier 8s, then you get some drawn into those tier 8 maps. Then you get some larger maps there. But at tier 6, I mean, generally speaking, the maps aren't really large. So I don't see as a need as much of this as Fubuki. But again, if you're talking about something like Shimakaze, that's another thing to consider. But I'm going to try to just kind of cap this video now, and just focusing on, this is what I would recommend if I'm living, if I generally live through halfway through the battle. Otherwise, I would say spread your points out to something like this. If you're trying to future-proof for Shimakaze, you know, maybe you're thinking something like this as an example. And then, of course, you can kind of trade some skills around for the others, all your personal preference at the end of the day. But for my dear Fubuki, this is what I like to run on Fubuki at tier 6. So, with that being said, this video went a little longer than I thought it would. Normally, the tier 6 ships I cover doesn't go over this long, but I want to show you Yamamoto Soroku. We want to show you some of the seasoned commanders and kind of just talk about not only just Fubuki, but if you're trying to build a commander thinking long-term ahead for tier 10 ship, then you kind of have some of my thoughts there as well for the Shimakaze. But in general, Fubuki is an awesome destroyer. I really like playing as a torpedo destroyer at tier 6. And yeah, it's just a really good boat. So if you liked today's video, give it a thumbs up. If you didn't, give a thumbs down. Subscribe if you do want to see more. If you haven't already subscribed, thanks so much. I really appreciate it. Thank you to my Patreon supporters. And until next time, take care.